Okay, Emily, I'm gonna do a quick little video of those two problems you asked about. So number 2 from that practice quiz that we did today. So this is your function notation problem here. So the x is always representing my input. So that's always what I'm plugging into the equation. So what I'm plugging in will replace the x, like what we did in problem number 1. Okay, so that the g of x as a whole, so this is the input that's going in, and that whole result is the output. Okay, I'm going to plug in a value for x, and I'm going to get a number back out. Okay, so what this part is asking you to do is, can you figure out what number you have to plug in so that when you're done, it would equal 6? Okay, so for example, a bad way to do this would be to guess and check. Okay, so let's say I tried, what if x is 1? Okay, so I would take 4 times 1 and take away 3. That's what's my function that I'm given. Okay, so 4 times 1 is 4 minus 3. So I would get 1. I did not get an answer of 6. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is I need to figure out, well, what x value would I have to have so that it would equal 6? So I can keep trying numbers all day long, but the best way to do this is to set up an equation to solve. I know what the result needs to be. The answer needs to be 6. And I need to figure out, well, so what value of x would make that equal 6? How am I going to get that? Well, I'll need to solve this equation and solve for x and get x all by itself, so then I know for sure what it is, instead of guessing and plugging in things for your input x to figure out how we are going to get it to be 6. Okay, so that means I need to undo this minus 3, so I'll have to add 3 to balance both sides of my equation. So then I've got 4x would equal 9. Okay, so if I take 4 times a number, I would have to get 9. Well, there's not a nice number that that's going to work out for, so these things are multiplying when they're written next to each other. So to undo it, I must divide both sides by 4. Okay, so you can take 9 divided by 4 and get your 2.25 or whatever it is, that's fine, but that's not listed as one of my answers. So I'm going to need to just leave it in that fraction form. So my answer is 9 over 4. Okay, that's the value of x that I would have to plug in place of the x so that it would equal 6. That is my input to get an output of 6. Okay. I mean, you could have also, if this b was throwing you off a little bit, you could have replaced b where the x is and then figure out what that needs to be to equal 6. To find the value of b, if that's what was throwing you off because it was asking for the value of b and we found the value of x, it's still going to be 9 over 4, but I was just keeping it as the input variable that they originally gave to us. Okay, not sure if that was any more helpful than when I went over in class, but I definitely took more time than I did in class to go over it. You also said number 7, so I'll take a look at number 7. I'll just do both parts and we'll see if both of those were okay. So here's the picture of the graph. It's y equals g of x. So it didn't tell us an equation for g of x. You know, some problems will say like y equals 2x, and that's my function. It didn't give me that. So that's what this part is representing. It's just giving a general function. Okay, so then part A is saying how many real numbers x does g of x equal -5? And so I think something you're having trouble with is when it gives you g of x equal to something, or we had in the other problem before, we had g of b equal to something. Okay, so we are given the output or the y value, right? Y is the same thing as g of x. If it helps you and you don't want to write g of x, you can write it as y equals -5. It's still correct, all right? The higher levels of math are just going to go away from writing it as y equals -5. So as long as you know it means the same thing as that, you can replace it and say, well, that's y. All right, so here's my y-axis. So I'm trying to figure out what x values or how many x values there would be so that y is -5. So if I look on the y-axis, here's where -5 would be located. So I need to find where on this graph called g of x is the point where the y value is -5. So that would be the point right here. Okay, the coordinates for the x value is kind of messy because it's not landing on a nice line, but we know for sure that that's hitting right and lining up with -5 for the y value. Okay, so it's asking you how many real numbers for x. Well, there's only one number that is going to get us that point. So the answer was just 1. Okay, it's not, doesn't mean that x equals 1. It means that that is the how many values for x would give you a y value of -5. So if I asked something else like that, if I said, well, how many real values of g of x would have to equal 2? I'm going to erase what I got going on over here. All right, so what that's saying is, that's saying that y is 2. Well, how many times does your graph go through a y value of 2? So here's where 2 would be located. Well, that would be right here, here, and here. So if I ask that question, there are 3 values for x that would give you a y value of 2 because there are 3 points that go through 2 as a y value. The one above, there was only 1 point that would go through -5 as a y value. So that's what that is asking. Okay. This was for example, this was the answer to the problem that we did. Okay, part B, what are the zeros of the function? So in one of our assignments, it talked about, or lessons, or both assignments and lessons, it talked about where it crosses the x-axis are the zeros. So those 3 points cross your x-axis. Okay, so those are all of our zeros for our function. And so this is the point -4, 0. This is the point 0, 0. And then this would be the point 1, 2, 8, 0. Okay, so when I list those zeros, I'm listing what the values of x would be to make that y equal 0. Okay, so the value of x I have is -4. My other value of x is 0. And my last value of x would be 8. So those are the 3 zeros for this function. Wherever it's crossing the x-axis, what those x values are, those are your zeros. Okay, not sure if that is more helpful than what I had before, but take a look at that, try to see if that makes sense. Reach out if you're still having trouble, and then maybe tomorrow morning we can do a live meeting if that would be easier. Okay, good luck.